What if I told you that 5 American families have made over $500 billion from every war since 1776, and one of them became vice president while his company made $39 billion from a war he helped start? This isn't conspiracy theory. These are court records, congressional testimony, federal seizure orders. I'm about to show you the most disturbing pattern in American history, and by the end of this video, you'll never look at war the same way again. Welcome to Bull Battle, where we expose what they don't want you to know. The pattern revealed. From the American Revolution to Afghanistan, I spent 3 months digging through government archives, congressional investigations, and federal court records. What I found made my blood run cold. It's not a secret conspiracy. It's worse. It's a legal system designed to let the people who decide to go to war profit from those wars. And here's the part that blew my mind. The profit margin has been exactly the same for 250 years. Whether it's 1776 or 2024, someone's making 15 to 17% of the total war cost. And it's the same family names, generation after generation, war after war. By the time you finish this video, you'll see American history completely differently. Let me show you how deep this goes. The foundation, where it all began. Meet Robert Morris. Your history teacher called him the financier of the Revolution, the patriot who saved America with his own money. That's partially true, but here's what they didn't teach you. The Library of Congress has his papers. Congressional records from 1779 show something disturbing. While Morris was the official contractor supplying the Continental Army, he was secretly awarding those contracts to his own company, Willing, Morris & Co. He was literally negotiating with himself. The markup? 15 to 45% above market rate. He was buying supplies cheap, then selling them to George Washington's starving troops at massive profit. A congressional investigation found him guilty. Want to know what happened to him? Nothing. He became one of the richest men in America and bought 6 million acres of land. No jail time, no fines. Why? Because laws against conflict of interest didn't exist yet. This was just the beginning. The Civil War. The defective weapons scandal. America is ripping itself apart in civil war. And a 24-year-old banker named J.P. Morgan saw dead soldiers as a business opportunity. Here's what happened. Documented in the official records of the War of the Rebellion, Volume 5. Morgan financed a deal to buy 5,000 Hall carbines from a U.S. Army arsenal. These weren't just any guns. They were defective. The Army had already rejected them as unsafe. Price? $3.50 each. Here's the insane part. Morgan then sold those exact same defective carbines back to the Union Army for $22 each. Let me say that again. He bought broken guns from the Army for $3.50 and sold them back to the same Army for $22. A 529% markup on weapons that didn't work. Army ordnance reports documented that these carbines malfunctioned in battle. Soldiers' thumbs were getting blown off from misfires. Men died because their guns exploded in their hands. Morgan knew this. He testified before Congress about it. The contracts were upheld as legal. He walked away with $100,000 in profit, equivalent to $3 million today. That blood money launched the Morgan banking dynasty that still exists today. But he wasn't alone. Cornelius Vanderbilt supplied ships to the Union Navy. The USS Warrior sank on its maiden voyage because it was unseaworthy. He made $1.8 million anyway. That's $35 million in today's money. The DuPont family had a 40% monopoly on Union gunpowder. Their revenue increased 400% during the war years. That's not profit. That's total revenue quadrupling while Americans were dying. Every single transaction is documented in Navy archives and company ledgers. All legal, all patriotic, all profitable. But nothing could prepare America for what was coming in World War I. The Nye Committee, the bombshell that changed nothing. Senator Gerald Nye does something unprecedented. He opens a Senate investigation into who really profited from World War I. It's called the Special Committee on Investigation of the Munitions Industry. What he found was so shocking that newspapers started calling weapons manufacturers merchants of death. Let me read you the actual numbers from Senate Report 944, 74th Congress. The DuPont Family Munitions Company, pre-war profits from 1910 to 1914, averaged $6 million per year. Wartime profits from 1914 to 1918, $58 million per year. That's an 867% increase in profit, while 116,000 American soldiers died in the trenches. Total World War I profits for one family, $237 million. That's $4.2 billion in today's money. But wait, it gets worse. J.P. Morgan Jr., the son of the guy who sold defective Civil War rifles, became the exclusive purchasing agent for Britain and France to buy American weapons. Think about what that means. He arranged $3 billion in weapons contracts and took a 1% commission. That's $30 million just for being the middleman. But here's the part that made my jaw drop. According to Senate testimony from Morgan's own partner, Thomas Lamont, Morgan also organized $1.5 billion in loans to Britain and France. Read that again slowly. He loaned them money to buy weapons that he was selling them and took a cut of both transactions. It's the perfect scam. They can't buy weapons without loans. He provides the loans. They use his loans to buy weapons from him. He profits twice. The Nye Committee called this exactly what it was, a massive conflict of interest that prolonged the war for profit. Senator Nye recommended sweeping reforms to prevent this from ever happening again. Congress ignored every single recommendation. Every single one. The families got richer. The laws stayed the same. And then World War II happened. World War II. Trading with the enemy. October 20th, 1942. The United States government issues vesting order number 248 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. They seize a company called Union Banking Corporation. Why? Because Union Banking had direct financial ties to Fritz Thyssen, a German industrialist who funded Adolf Hitler's rise to power. Want to know who was on the board of directors of Union Banking? Prescott Bush, father of President George H.W. Bush, grandfather of President George W. Bush. This isn't speculation. The seizure order is in the U.S. National Archives, Record Group 131. Now, Prescott Bush was never personally charged with a crime. The company was seized, not his personal assets. But the connection is documented federal record. Let that sink in. A future president's family had financial ties to Nazi funding that were serious enough for the U.S. government to seize the assets during wartime. But it doesn't stop there. Ford Motor Company's German subsidiary, Ford Werk, produced military trucks for the Wehrmacht, Hitler's army. In 2001, after decades of denial, Ford commissioned its own independent historical investigation. The report title? Research Findings About Ford Work Under the Nazi Regime. It confirmed that Ford Work used slave labor from concentration camps. In 1998, Ford quietly paid into a German compensation fund for Holocaust survivors. The German Federal Archives in Koblenz have the production records. The documentary evidence is irrefutable. Then there's IBM. IBM's German subsidiary, De Homag, provided the Hollerith punch card systems, basically early computers, that the Nazis used for logistics, including Holocaust logistics. IBM maintained technical control of these systems throughout the war. This isn't some conspiracy blog theory. It's documented in captured Nazi records that were presented at the Nuremberg trials. The U.S. Justice Department published a preliminary study in 1997 about assets stolen by Germany. IBM's role is documented. These companies all operated through subsidiaries. Most of these activities were in legal gray areas. But here's the question that haunts me. Is legal the same as moral? Because while American soldiers were dying to defeat fascism, American companies were making sure their subsidiaries kept profiting from it. Vietnam, the blueprint perfected. Vietnam War. This is where the model gets refined. A construction company called Brown and Root had been major political donors to one man since the 1930s, Lyndon B. Johnson. Watch what happens. November 22, 1963. Johnson becomes president after Kennedy's assassination. 1964 to 1968. Brown and Root's Vietnam contracts explode to $380 million. The company that funded Johnson's entire political career suddenly becomes the main contractor building military bases in Vietnam. This is documented in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers contract database and verified in Robert Caro's Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, The Years of Lyndon Johnson. I'm not saying Johnson started the Vietnam War just for Brown and Root. Wars are complex. Multiple factors drive these decisions, but the pattern is undeniable. Political donations lead to wartime contracts. Brown and Root was later bought by a company you definitely know, Halliburton. Remember that name. We're coming back to it. Meanwhile, Bell Helicopter is selling 7,000 UH-1 Huey helicopters to the military for $2.2 billion. According to their own SEC filings, their mandatory public financial disclosures, Bell's parent company Textron saw profits increase 340% between 1964 and 1970. Every statistic I just gave you is from government databases and SEC filings, public record that anyone can verify. The blueprint was now perfected. Donate to politicians. Get contracts when they start wars. Profit massively. But the absolute peak of this system, that happened in the 21st century, and it involves a vice president. The Cheney Files, the most blatant case in history. January 20th, 2001. Dick Cheney is sworn in as Vice President of the United States. But let's rewind 5 years. 1995 to 2000. Cheney is CEO of Halliburton. Yes, the same company that bought Brown and Root. When Cheney becomes vice president, he's required to file financial disclosure forms. It's public record. Those forms show he retained stock options in Halliburton worth $18 million. Now watch the timeline. March 19, 2003, the Iraq War begins. 2003 to 2004, Halliburton's subsidiary KBR receives $7 billion in no-bid contracts. No bid means exactly what it sounds like. No competitive bidding process. The contract is just awarded. By the end of the Iraq War, KBR's total contracts, $39.5 billion. That's billion with a B. KBR became the largest contractor in Iraq. This is documented in a 2007 Congressional Research Service report titled Defense Contracting in Iraq, Issues and Options for Congress. During Cheney's vice presidency from 2001 to 2009, Halliburton's stock price tripled. The vice president holds $18 million in stock options in a company that makes $39.5 billion from a war that his administration started. Now, legally, Cheney recused himself from some decisions. Federal investigations found no criminal wrongdoing. But come on, does this pass any reasonable smell test? The optics alone are devastating. The conflict of interest is staring you in the face. But there's more. September 16, 2007, Nisour Square, Baghdad. Private military contractors from a company called Blackwater open fire in a crowded intersection. 17 Iraqi civilians are killed, including women and children. 4 Blackwater guards are convicted of murder and manslaughter in federal court. Case number, USA v. Slough et al., U.S. District Court for D.C. In December 2020, all 4 are pardoned. Blackwater was founded by Eric Prince, his sister, Betsy DeVos, who served as Secretary of Education from 2017 to 2021. Blackwater had received $1.6 billion in contracts from the State Department and CIA. This is in the State Department Office of Inspector General report from 2007. But wait, there's more. Because it's not just Halliburton and Blackwater. Between 2001 and 2021, 3 defense companies, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon, received a combined $578 billion in contracts. I'll say that number again, $578 billion. Want to know their stock performance during the War on Terror? Lockheed Martin, up 1,200%. Raytheon, up 680%. During that same period, these companies spent $117 million on lobbying Congress. Every number I just gave you is from usaspending.gov, the official federal contract database, and opensecrets.org, which tracks Federal Election Commission filings. Here's the question that keeps me up at night. The war in Afghanistan lasted 20 years. It became America's longest war. Who benefits when wars last 2 decades instead of 2 years? The pattern decoded. 250 years of the same scam. Let me show you something that made my blood run cold when I calculated it. World War I. Total cost, $334 billion in today's dollars. Contractor profits, $58 billion. That's 17.4% of the total war cost. World War II. Total cost, $4.7 trillion. Contractor profits, $680 billion. That's 14.5%. Vietnam. Total cost, $1 trillion. Contractor profits, $168 billion. That's 16.8%. Iraq and Afghanistan. Total cost, $2.3 trillion. Contractor profits, $392 billion. That's 17%. Do you see it? 15 to 17%. Across 250 years. Different enemies, different technologies, different continents, but the exact same profit margin. This is from the Congressional Budget Office report, Costs of Major U.S. Wars, published in 2010, cross-referenced with IRS corporate tax archives. How is this possible? Because the system is designed to maintain it. It's called the revolving door. Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense under Bush Sr., then Halliburton CEO, then Vice President under Bush Jr., William Cohen, Secretary of Defense under Clinton, then founded the Cohen Group, a defense consulting firm. Ashton Carter, Secretary of Defense under Obama, then joined the board of Raytheon and Lazard defense deals. You make policy as a government official. You leave government and make millions from the companies that benefit from that policy. Sometimes you come back to government and do it again. This is documented in Department of Defense employment records and SEC filings. You might be thinking, how is any of this legal? Great question. 1775 to 1863. No conflict of interest laws existed at all. 1863. Abraham Lincoln passes the False Claims Act to stop war profiteering. It's rarely enforced. 1934. The Nye Committee exposes everything and recommends major reforms. Congress ignores them. 1948. The Truman Committee tries again. Reforms are passed but mostly unenforced. 2006. Federal acquisition regulations are updated. Enforcement remains limited. The laws exist on paper, but the loopholes are big enough to fly a Black Hawk helicopter through. Why this should terrify you. Here's why this matters to you, right now, today. Since 2001, over 7,000 American service members killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, over 53,000 wounded, over 900,000 total casualties when you include contractors and Afghan and Iraqi forces. While defense contractors made $392 billion in profit, VA hospitals faced budget cuts, veterans waited months for medical care, schools closed, roads crumbled, bridges collapsed. The United States spends more on defense than the next 9 countries combined, and 15% of that, like clockwork, becomes private profit for the same families and corporations. I'm not saying companies shouldn't profit. I'm not saying all defense contractors are evil. But when the people who decide whether we go to war are the same people who profit from war, when the vice president owns $18 million in stock in a company that makes $39.5 billion from a war his administration starts, when a senator receives campaign donations from defense contractors and then votes to extend wars, doesn't that create a system where war becomes good for business, where peace is bad for quarterly earnings, where the longest war in American history is the most profitable, the warning we ignored? Let me take you back to January 17, 1961. President Dwight D. Eisenhower is giving his farewell address. This is a 5-star general, supreme Allied commander in World War II. He's seen more war than almost any American in history, and here's what he says. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals. An alert and knowledgeable citizenry. That's you. That's everyone watching this video right now. Every fact I've shared today comes from public records, congressional testimony on Senate.gov, federal contracts on usaspending.gov, lobbying data on opensecrets.org, National Archives documents, SEC financial filings, federal court records. The pattern isn't hidden. It's hiding in plain sight in government databases that most people never look at. What you can do right now. Here's what you can do today. First, go to usaspending.gov. It's the official federal contract database. Type in defense contracts. See where your tax dollars actually go. The numbers will shock you. Second, contact your representatives. Demand transparency in defense contracting. Demand enforcement of conflict of interest laws. Their contact info is public record. Third, there's a bill currently in Congress called the Stop Trading on Military Service Act. It would ban members of Congress and their families from owning defense stocks. Look it up. Support it. Fourth, share this video. Most people have no idea this pattern exists. The only way to break a 250-year pattern is to make enough people aware of it. For 2.5 centuries, the same pattern has repeated. The same families, the same corporations, the same 15% profit margin. War after war after war. But here's the thing about patterns. They can be broken. They just need enough people to see them first. You now see the pattern. The question is, what are you going to do about it? This is Bull Battle. We expose what they don't want you to know. Hit subscribe if you want more investigations like this. Drop a comment telling me which war profiteer shocked you the most. And remember, they're counting on you to stay ignorant. Don't give them that satisfaction.